Good morning, Cox community. All right, so we're continuing on with Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. We are going to be reading chapters 7 and 8. And let's continue on the adventures of Peter Hatcher. Chapter 7, The Flying Train Committee. In January, our class started a project on the city. Mrs. Haver, our teacher, divided us up into committees by where we live. That way we could work from home. My committee was me, Jimmy Fargo, and Sheila. Our topic was transportation. We decided to make my apartment the meeting place because I'm only one of the three of us who's got his own bedroom. In a few weeks, each committee has to hand in a booklet, a poster, and be ready to give an oral report. The first day we got together after school, we bought a yellow poster board. Jimmy wanted a blue one, but Sheila talked him out of it. Yellow is a much brighter color, she explained. Everything will show up on it. Blue is too dull. Sheila thinks she's smarter than me and Jimmy put together, just because she's a girl. So right away, she told us she would be in charge of our booklet, and me and Jimmy could do most of the poster, as long as we check with her first to make sure she likes our ideas. We agreed since Sheila promised to do 10 pages of written work and we would only have to do 5. After we bought the yellow poster board, we went to the library. We took our 7 books. We took out 7 books on transportation. We wanted to learn all we could about speed, traffic, congestion, and pollution. We arranged to meet on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for the next 2 weeks. Our first few committee meetings turned out like this. We got to my place by 3:30, had a snack, then played with dribble for another half hour. Sheila gave up on cooties when Fudge lost his front teeth. But it still isn't much fun to have her hanging around. She's always complaining that she got stuck with the worst possible committee, and that me and Jimmy fool around more than we work. We only put up with her because we have no choice. Sheila and Jimmy have to be home for supper before 5:30, so at 5 o'clock we start cleaning up. We keep our equipment under my bed in a shoebox. We have a set of magic markers, Elmer's glue, Scotch tape, a really sharp pair of scissors, and a container of silver sparkle. Sheila carries our committee booklet back and forth with her. She doesn't trust us enough to leave it at my house. The poster board fits under my bed along with our supplies. We stack the library books on my desk. The reason I make sure we clean up good is that my mother told me if I left a mess, we'd have to find someplace else to work. By our 3rd meeting, I told Jimmy and Sheila that I'd figured out the solution to New York City's traffic problems. We have to get rid of the traffic, I said. There shouldn't be any cars or buses or taxis allowed in the city. What we really need is a citywide monorail system. That's too expensive, Sheila said. It sounds good, but it's not practical. I disagree, I told Sheila. It's very practical. Besides, getting rid of traffic, it'll get rid of air pollution, and it'll get people where they need to go faster. But it's not practical, Peter, Sheila said again. It costs too much. I opened one of my books on transportation and read Sheila a quote. A monorail system is the hope of the future. I cleared my throat and looked up. But we can't write a report just about the monorail, Sheila said. We'll never be able to fill 20 written pages with that. We can write big, Jimmy suggested. No, Sheila said. I want a good mark on this project. Peter, you can write your 5 pages about the monorail system and how it works. Jimmy, you can write your 5 pages about pollution caused by transportation. And I'll write my 10 pages on the history of transportation in the city. Sheila folded her arms and smiled. Can I write big? Jimmy asked. I don't care how big you write as long as you put your name on your 5 pages, Sheila told him. That's not fair, Jimmy said. This is supposed to be a group project. Why should I have to put my name on my 5 pages? Then don't write big, Sheila shouted. Okay, I'll write so small Mrs. Haver will need a microscope to see the letters. Very funny, Sheila said. Look, I told both of them. I think all our written work should be in the same handwriting. That's the only fair way. Otherwise, Mrs. Haver will know who did what, and it won't be a group project. Say, that's a good idea, Jimmy said. Which one of us has the best handwriting? Me and Jimmy looked at Sheila. Well, I do have a nice even script, Sheila said. But if I'm going to copy over your written work, you better give it to me by next Tuesday. Otherwise, I won't have enough time to do the job. And you two better get going on your poster. Sheila talked like she was the teacher and we were the kids. Me and Jimmy designed the whole poster ourselves. We used the pros and cons of each kind of transportation. It was really clever. We divided a chart into land, sea, and air, and we planned an illustration for each, with the airplanes done in silver sparkle and the letters done in red and blue magic marker. We got halfway through the lettering that day. We also sketched in the ship, the plane, and the truck. When Sheila saw it, she asked, "Is that supposed to be a train?" "No," I told her, "it's a truck." "Doesn't look like one," she said. "It will," Jimmy told her, "when it's finished." "I hope so," Sheila said, "because right now it looks like a flying train." "That's because the ground's not under it yet," Jimmy said. "Yeah," I agreed. "See, we've got to make it look like it's on a street. Right now it just kind of looks like it's up in space." "So does the ship," Sheila said. "We'll put some water lines around it," I told her. "And some clouds around the plane," Sheila said. "Listen," Jimmy hollered. "Didn't anybody ever tell you you're too bossy? This poster is ours. You do the booklet. Remember, that's the way you wanted it." "See, there you go again," Sheila said. "You keep forgetting this is a committee. We're supposed to work together." "Working together doesn't mean you give the orders and we carry them out," Jimmy said. My feelings exactly, I thought. Sheila didn't answer Jimmy. She picked up her things, got her coat, and left. "I hope she never comes back," Jimmy said. "She'll be back," I told him. "We're her committee." Jimmy laughed. "Yeah, we're all one happy committee." I put our poster under the bed, said goodbye to Jimmy, then washed up for supper. My mother was being pretty nice about our committee meetings. She arranged to have Fudge play at Ralph's apartment on Tuesdays and at Jenny's on Thursdays. Sam has the chicken pox, so he can't play at all. I was glad that next week would be our last committee meeting after school. I was sick of Sheila and I was getting sick of transportation. Besides, now that I know a monorail system was the only way to save our city, I was getting upset. The mayor and all the other guys that run things at City Hall weren't doing anything about installing one. If I know that's the best method of city transportation, how come they don't know it? The next day when I came home from school, I went into my bedroom to see Dribble like I always do. Fudge was in there, sitting on my bed. "Why are you in my room?" I asked him. He smiled. "You know you're not supposed to be in here. This is my room." "Want to see?" Fudge said. "See what?" "Want to see?" "What? What are you talking about?" I asked. He jumped off my bed and crawled underneath. He came out with our poster. He held it up. "See?" he said. "Pretty." "What did you do?" I yelled. "What did you do to our poster?" It was covered all over with scribbles and every magic marker. It was ruined. It was a mess and it was ruined. I was ready to kill Fudge. I grabbed my poster and ran to the kitchen to show it to my mother. I could hardly speak. "Look," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "Just look what he did to my poster." I felt tears come to my eyes, but I didn't care. "How could you let him?" I asked my mother. "How? Don't you care about me?" I threw the poster down and ran into my room. I slammed the door, took off my shoe, and flung it at the wall. I made a black mark where it hit. Well, so what? Soon I heard my mother hollering, and then Fudge crying. After a while, my mother knocked on my bedroom door and called, "Peter, may I come in?" I didn't answer. She opened the door and walked over to my bed. She sat down next to me. "I'm very sorry," she said. I still didn't say anything. "Peter," she began. I didn't look at her. She touched my arm. "Peter, please listen." "Don't you see, Mom? I can't ever do my homework without him messing it up. It just isn't fair. I wish he was never born. Never! I hate him." "You don't hate him," my mother said. "You just think you do." "Don't tell me," I said. "I mean it. I really can't stand that kid." "You're angry," my mother told me. I know that, and I don't blame you. Fudge had no right to touch your poster. I spanked him. You did? I asked. Fudge never gets spanked. My parents don't believe in spanking. You really spanked him? I asked again. Yes, my mother said. Hard? I asked. On the back side, she told me. I thought that over. Peter, my mother put her arm around me, I'll buy you a new poster board tomorrow. It was really my fault. I should never have let him into your room. That's why I need a lock on my door, I said. I don't like locks on doors. We're a family. We don't have to lock each other out. If I had a lock, Fudge wouldn't have gotten my poster. It won't happen again, my mother promised. I wanted to believe her, but really I didn't. Unless she tied him up, I knew my brother would get into my room again. The next day, while I was at school, my mother bought a new yellow poster board. The hard part was explaining to Jimmy that we had to start all over. He was a good sport about it. He said this time he'd make sure the truck didn't look like a flying train. And I said this time I'd make pencil marks first, so my letters didn't go uphill. Our committee met that afternoon. Sheila didn't mention the last time. Neither did we. Me and Jimmy worked on the poster while Sheila copied her written work into the booklet. We'd be ready to give our oral report to the class on Monday, not like some committees who hadn't even started yet. By 5 o'clock, we had finished our poster and Sheila was almost done with the cover for our booklet. Jimmy walked over and stood behind her, watching her work. After a minute, he yelled, "What do you think you're doing, Sheila?" I got up from the floor and joined them at my desk. I took a look at the cover. It was pretty nice. It said, Transportation in the City. Under that, it said, by Sheila Tubman, Peter Hatcher, and Jimmy Fargo. And under that, in small letters, it said, Handwritten by Miss Sheila Tubman. Now, I knew why Jimmy was mad. "Oh, no," I said, holding my hand to my head. "How could you?" Sheila didn't say anything. "It's not fair," I told her. "Why didn't you put our names on the poster?" "But the cover's all done," Sheila said. "Can't you see that? I'll never get the letters so straight again. It looks perfect." "Oh, no," Jimmy shouted. "We're not handing the booklet in like that. I'll rip it up before I let you." He grabbed the booklet and threatened to tear it in half. Sheila screamed, "You wouldn't! I'll kill you! Give it back to me, Jimmy Fargo!" She was ready to cry. I knew Jimmy wouldn't tear it up, but I didn't say so. "Peter, make him give it back." "Will you take off that line about your handwriting?" I asked. "I can't. It'll ruin the booklet." "Then I think you should rip it up," I said. Sheila stomped her foot. "Ooh, I hate you both." "You don't really," I told her. "You just think you do." "I know I do," Sheila cried. "That's because you're angry right now," I said. I couldn't help smiling. Sheila jumped up and tried to get the booklet, but Jimmy held it over his head, and he's much taller than Sheila. She had no chance at all. Finally, she sat down and whispered, "I give up. You win. I'll take my name off." "You promise?" Jimmy asked. "I promise," Sheila said. Jimmy set the booklet down on my desk in front of Sheila. "Okay," he said, "start." "I'm not going to make a whole new cover," Sheila said. "What I'll do is I'll turn the bottom line into decoration." She picked up a magic marker and made little flowers out of the words. Soon, handwritten by Miss Sheila Tubman, turned into 16 small flowers. "There," Sheila said, "it's done." "It looks pretty good," I told her. "It would have looked better without those flowers," Jimmy said, "but at least it's fair now." That night, I showed my mother and father our new poster. They thought it was great, especially our silver sparkle airplane. My mother put the poster on top of the refrigerator so it'd be safe until the next day when I would take it to school. Now I had nothing to worry about. Sheila had the booklet, the poster was safe, and our committee was finished before schedule. I went into my room to relax. Fudge was sitting on the floor near my bed. My shoebox of supplies was in front of him. His face was a mess of magic marker colors, and he was using my extra sharp scissors to snip away at his hair. And the hair he snipped was dropping into Dribble's bowl, which he had in front of him on the floor. "See," he said. "See, Fudge? Fudgy's a barber." That night, I found out hair doesn't hurt my turtle. I picked off every strand from his shell. I cleaned out his bowl and washed off his rocks. He seemed happy. 2 things happened the next day. One was my mother had to take Fudge to the real barber to do something about his hair. He had plenty left in the back, but just about everything up front and on top. But just about nothing in front and on top. The barber said there wasn't much he could do until the hair grew back. Between his fangs and his hair, he was getting funnier looking every day. The second was my father came home with a chain latch for my bedroom door. I could reach it when I stood up on tiptoe, but that brother of mine couldn't reach it at all, no matter what. Our committee was the first to give its report. Mrs. Harper said we did a super job. She liked our poster a lot. She thought the silver sparkle airplane was the best. The only thing she asked was, how come we included a picture of a flying train? Chapter 8. Let's see. Aunt Linda, Chapter 8, the TV star. Aunt Linda is my mother's sister. She lives in Boston. Last week, she had a baby girl, so now I have a new cousin. My mother decided to fly to Boston to see Aunt Linda and the new baby. I'll only be gone for the weekend, my mother told me. I was sitting on her bed watching her pack. I know, I said. Daddy will take care of you and Fudge. I know, I said again. Are you sure you'll be all right? She asked me. Sure, why not? Will you help Daddy with Fudge? Sure, Mom, don't worry. I'm not worrying, it's just that Daddy is so, well, you know. He doesn't know much about taking care of children. Then she closed her suitcase. We'll be fine, Mom, I said. I was really looking forward to the weekend. My father doesn't care about keeping things neat. He never examines me to see if I'm clean, and he lets me stay up late at night. On Friday morning, all four of us rode down in the elevator to say goodbye to my mother. Henry looked at the suitcase. You going away, Mr. Hatcher? He asked. My mother answered, No, I am, Henry. My sister just had her first baby. I'm flying to Boston for the weekend to help out. New baby, Fudge said. Baby, baby, baby. Nobody paid attention to him. Sometimes my brother just talks to hear the sound of his own voice. Have a nice visit, Mrs. Hatcher, Henry told my mother when we reached the lobby. Thank you, Henry, my mother said. Keep an eye on my family for me. Will do, Mrs. Hatcher, Henry giving my father a wink. Outside, my father hailed a taxi. He put the suitcase in first, then held the door for my mother. When he was settled in the cab, my father said, Don't worry about us. We'll be just fine. Just fine, Mommy, Fudge yelled. Bye, Mom. See you Sunday, I said. My mother blew us kisses. Then her cab drove away. My father sighed while Fudge jumped up and down, calling, Bye, Mommy. Bye, bye, bye. I had no school that day. The teachers were at a special meeting. So my father said he'd take me and Fudge to the office with him. My father's office is in a huge building made of almost all glass. It's really a busy place. You never see people just sitting quietly at desks. Everyone's always rushing around. A person could get lost in there. My father has a private office and his own secretary. Her name is Janet, and she's very pretty. I especially like her hair. It's thick and black. She has the longest eyelashes I've ever seen. Once I heard my mother say, Janet must have to get up at the crack of dawn to put on her face. My father just laughed when my mother said it. Janet's seen me before, but this is her first time meeting with Fudge. I was glad his hair was finally growing back. I explained right off about his teeth. He'll look a lot better when he's older, I said. He knocked out his front too, but when he's like 6 or 7, he'll get new ones. See, Fudge said, opening his mouth. All gone. My father said, Janet, the boys are going to be here for the morning. Could you amuse them while I can clear up some work? Certainly, Mr. Hatcher, Janet said. You go ahead into your office and I'll take the boys on a tour of the rest of the agency. As soon as my father went into his private office, Janet took out her pocketbook. She reached in and came out with a hairbrush, some lipstick, and a bag of crackers. Want some? She asked me and Fudge. Okay, I said, taking a handful. Fudge did the same. The crackers were shaped like little goldfish. I nibbled while Janet fixed herself up. She had a big folding mirror in her desk drawer. She set it up on top of her desk and went to work on herself. When she was finished, she looked exactly the same as she did when we came in. But I guess she didn't think so because she said, much better. Then she put all her stuff away and took me by one hand and Fudge by the other. We walked down a long hall through a doorway into another section of the agency. We came to a room where there was a bunch of kids with mothers. I guess there were at least 50 of them. Most of the kids were kind of small, like Fudge. Some were crying. Is this a nursery school or what? I asked Janet. She laughed. They're here to try out for the new Toddle Bike commercial. You mean they all want to be the kid who rides the Toddle Bike on TV? Yes, at least their mothers want them to be picked, Janet said. But we can only use one. You mean only one out of all these kids is going to be picked? That's right, Janet said. Who picks them? I asked. Your father and Mr. Denberg are doing it. But of course, Mr. Vincent, the president of the Toddle Bike Company, has to approve. Just then, a door opened and a secretary came out. Next, she called to the waiting kids. My Murray's next, a mother said. Oh, no, he's not, another mother called. Sally is next. Ladies, please. You'll all have a turn, the secretary said. Murray got to be next. He was a little red-headed kid. He wasn't in the other room for 2 minutes when the door opened and a big man with a cigar in his mouth came out. No, 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 he shouted. He's not the type at all. Murray was crying. His mother yelled at the big man. What do you know anyway? You wouldn't know a treasure if you found one. She shook her fist at him. Janet whispered to me, that's Mr. Vincent, the president of Toddle Bike. Mr. Vincent walked to the center of the room. He looked around at all the kids. When he looked over at us, he pointed and called, there he is! That's the kid I want! I thought he meant me. I got excited. I could just see myself on TV riding the Toddle Bike. All my friends would turn on their sets and say, hey, look, there's Peter. While I was thinking about what fun it would be, Mr. Vincent came over to us and grabbed Fudge. He lifted him up. Perfect, he cried. He's perfect. The mothers who were waiting packed up their kids and left right away. Mr. Vincent took off with Fudge in his arms. Janet chased him. She called, but Mr. Vincent, you don't understand. I ran after Janet. Mr. Vincent carried Fudge into the other room. He announced, I found him myself, the perfect kid to ride the Toddle Bike in my new commercial. Mr. Vincent put Fudge down and took the cigar out of his mouth. There were 2 other men in the room. One of them was Mr. Denberg. The other one was my father. Hi, Daddy, Fudge said. George, my father told Mr. Vincent, this is my son. He's no actor or model. He can't make your Toddle Bike commercial. He doesn't have to be an actor or model. He's perfect the way he is, Mr. Vincent insisted. Now look, George, we want to make the best possible commercial for your company, but Fudge can't be the boy to ride the Toddle Bike. Now you listen, Hatcher, Mr. Vincent raised his voice. I wondered why he called my father Hatcher, just like Mr. Yarby did. Mr. Vincent pointed to Fudge. Either that kid rides my Toddle Bike, or I take my account to another agency. It's that simple. My father looked at Mr. Denberg. It's your decision, Warren, Mr. Denberg told my father. I don't want to be the one to tell you what to do. My father picked up Fudge and held him in his lap. Would you like to ride the Toddle Bike, Fudge? It's just like the one you have at home. Why are you asking him? I said. What does he know about making commercials? My father acted like he'd forgotten I was even around. I'm thinking, Peter, he said. Please be quiet. Well, Hatcher, Mr. Vincent said, what'll it be? This kid of yours, or do I move to another agency? I remembered how my father lost the Juicio account because of Fudge. Now, maybe he'd lose this one too, and I don't think he can afford that. Finally, my father said, all right, George, you can use them. On one condition, though. What's that, Hatcher? Mr. Vincent asked. The commercial has to be made this afternoon. After today, my son Fudge won't be available. That's fine with me, Hatcher, Mr. Vincent said. Is he going to get paid? I asked my father. I'll worry about that, Peter, my father said. That probably meant yes. He'd be paid and have lots of money in the bank. I'd have nothing. And someday I'd have to borrow from him. No, wait a minute. Never. I'll never borrow money from Fudge. I'll starve first. Can I at least watch when you make the commercial, I asked. Certainly, my father said. You can watch the whole thing. I turned to Mr. Denberg. Will Fudge be famous? I asked. No, not famous, but a lot of people will think he looks familiar, Mr. Denberg said. I turned to Mr. Vincent. Do you know he has no two front top teeth? That's part of his charm, Mr. Vincent said. And he cut off all his hair 2 months ago? Well, he looks fine now, Mr. Vincent said. And he can't even talk in long sentences yet, I told everyone in the room. He doesn't have to say a word, Mr. Vincent told me. I couldn't think of any other reasons why Mr. Vincent shouldn't use Fudge in his Toddle Bike commercials. It was settled. Soon Fudge would be a famous television star, and I would be plain old Peter Hatcher. 4th grade nothing. Let's begin right after lunch, Mr. Denberg said. We should get it filmed in about 2 hours. While my father and Mr. Denberg worked out all the arrangements, I asked Janet where the men's room was. She walked me to it. I told her thank you and that she didn't have to wait. I'd find my way back. When I was safely inside, I looked at myself in the mirror. I wish Fudge had never been born, I thought. Everything good always happens to him. If he had to be born, I wish he could have been 9 or 10, like me. Then Mr. Vincent wouldn't want him to be the one to ride the Toddle Bike in the commercial. Janet sent down to the coffee shop for some sandwiches and drinks. After we ate, we all walked to the other section of the agency where the cameras were set up. A make-believe street scene was in the background. The Toddle Bike was shiny and red. My father told Fudge all he had to do was ride it around. Fudge liked that. He zoomed all over the place. Vroom, 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 he called. My father, Mr. Vincent, and Janet sat on folding chairs and watched the action. I sat on the floor at my father's side. Mr. Denberg was the director. He said, Okay, Fudge, we're ready to begin now. You ride the Toddle Bike where I tell you, and I'll take a picture of you doing it, all right? No, Fudge said. What do you mean? What does he mean, Hatcher? Mr. Vincent asked. Why did he say no? My father groaned. Look, George, using Fudge was your idea, not mine. Mr. Denberg tried again. Okay, Fudge, this is it. The camera said, Start riding this way. Ready, set, go. Fudge sat there on the Toddle Bike, but he wouldn't pedal. Come on, kid, let's go, the cameraman called. No, don't want to, Fudge answered. What's with this kid, Mr. Hatcher? The cameraman asked. Fudge, my father said. Do what the nice man tells you to. No, don't have to. Janet whispered to my father. How about some cookies, Mr. Hatcher? Good idea, Janet, my father told her. I have some Oreos right here, she said, patting her pocketbook. Shall I give them to him? One at a time, my father said. Janet walked over to across the room to Fudge. He was still sitting on the Toddle Bike. If you do what the nice man says, you can have a cookie, Janet told him. Show me, Fudge said. Janet held up a box of Oreos. She was really well prepared, I thought. She must eat all day long, what with the crackers shaped like goldfish and a whole box of Oreos, too. I wondered what else she had in that pocketbook. Give me, Fudge said. Janet held up one cookie. Fudge reached for it, but Janet didn't let him get it. If you do what the nice man says, then you can have an Oreo, maybe even 2 or 3 Oreos. First cookie, Fudge said. First do what the nice man says, Janet told him. No, first cookie. Give him one, Janet, Mr. Denberg said. We haven't got all day to fool around. Janet gave Fudge one Oreo. He ate it up. Okay, kid. All ready now? The cameraman said. You ride over to me. Fudge didn't do it. Mr. Vincent was losing his patience. Hatcher, he hollered. You get that son of yours to ride my Toddle Bike or I'm taking my whole account away from you and your agency. Must I remind you, George, using Fudge was your idea, not mine, my father said. Forget about whose idea it was, Hatcher. He's your kid. You better get through to him now. I have an idea, my father said. He walked to a corner of the room and beckoned to the others. Mr. Denberg and Mr. Vincent gathered around him, along with the cameraman and Janet. They looked like a bunch of football players huddled together talking about the next play. Soon my father called me. Peter, would you join us, please? Sure, Dad, I said. What is it? Peter, we want you to ride the Toddle Bike for us, to show Fudge how it's done. But he already knows how to ride, I said. Didn't you see him zooming around? He won't do it for the cameras, though, my father explained, so we need your help. Will I be in the commercial too, I asked. Well, the toddle bike is really for very young children, Mr. Denberg said. Otherwise, we'd have you do it in a minute. I got the message. It was like buying the shoes and like at Dr. Brown's office. They were going to use me to get Fudge to do what they wanted him to do. I wondered how anybody would ever manage my brother without my help. I walked over to Fudge and told him I was going to ride the toddle bike. Get off, I said. Fudge held onto the bike. No, mine. It's not yours, my father told him. But Fudge wouldn't move for anything. He closed his eyes and screamed. Can he scream loud when he tries? So my father had to pull him off the toddle bike. Fudge kicked and kept screaming, and I'll bet Mr. Vincent was sorry that he ever spotted my brother in the first place. I got on the toddle bike. It was so small my knees practically touched the ground, but I managed to ride it around just where the cameraman told me to. See how nice Peter can ride the toddle bike, Janet said. Here, Peter, come have an Oreo. You did that so well you can have 2 or 3 if you want. Fudge stopped screaming. Me, he said. What, my father asked him. Me, ride, me. You can't ride as well as Peter can, Mr. Denberg said. Can so, Fudge told him. I don't think so, Mr. Denberg said. You already had a turn. You didn't do what I told you to do. Me! You want to try again? My father asked. Again, Fudge said. Again. Well, I don't know, Mr. Denberg said. Well, Mr. Vincent said, chewing on a cigar. Well, the cameraman said, scratching his head. Please, Fudge begged. I never heard my brother say please before. Mr. Denberg said, okay, we'll give you one more chance. Fudge ran to the toddle bike. I got off and he jumped on. Now? He asked Mr. Denberg. Now, Mr. Denberg said. Ride this way, Fudge, over here towards me. Fudge did what he was told. Just like Peter, he said. See? Just like Peter. Janet gave me a kiss on my cheek. You saved the day, Peter Hatcher, she said. When she wasn't looking, I wiped my face. Her kiss was too juicy. And that's the end of chapter 8. Stay tuned for chapters 9 and 10. Bye.